Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to unlock a forgotten story behind one of history's most famous disasters. And believe it or not, it's a story that hinges not on a giant mountain of ice, but on a single, tiny piece of brass.
1,500. That's roughly how many souls were lost when the RMS Titanic, the quote-unquote unsinkable ship, went down on its very first voyage. It's a number that has just echoed through history for over a century.
You know, we all think we know the story, right? Arrogance, too much speed, and a nasty encounter with an iceberg. But what if I told you that beyond all those headlines, a much smaller, much simpler object played a massive, devastating role?
Okay, so let's start with the story we all know, that fateful night in the North Atlantic. Because it's right here, in the official version of events, that we start to see the first clues that a huge piece of the puzzle is missing.
For more than a century, the blame has been pointed at this perfect storm of factors. You've got the reckless speed through an ice field, the warnings from other ships that were basically ignored, and yeah, maybe even some issues with how the ship was built. It was a cocktail of human error and technical failure.
But here's the thing. While all of those factors are definitely part of the story, they don't really answer the most critical question of all. Why didn't the lookout see the iceberg sooner?
To find that answer, to find this missing piece, we've got to rewind the clock. And we're not going to the middle of the ocean. No, we have to go back to the docks, before the Titanic ever left port.
So check out this timeline. The chain of events that really sealed the ship's fate didn't start with a crash. It started 4 days earlier, on April 10th, with a simple administrative decision. A key officer was suddenly taken off the crew.
All right, so let's zoom in on this sudden demotion. This whole pivotal moment really centered on one guy, Second Officer David Blair, and a really simple, totally routine task he did right before everything went sideways.
You have to remember, this is 1912. There's no radar, no high-tech gear. The safety of every single one of the 2,200 people on board rested on the eyesight of a couple of guys perched way up in the crow's nest. And what was their most important tool? A good pair of binoculars.
So, David Blair, he was a seasoned officer, and he was in charge of this critical equipment. Following standard procedure, he locked the ship's powerful binoculars in a storage locker to keep them safe, and then he put the one and only key right in his pocket.
But then, at the absolute last minute, the shipping company, White Star Line, decided to make a change. They wanted to create a dream team of senior officers, so they brought in a bigwig from one of the Titanic's sister ships. Well, this caused a chain reaction, and poor David Blair, he got bumped off the crew list completely.
And this one little administrative change, just a simple shuffling of the crew roster, is what set the stage for one of the worst disasters in maritime history.
Seriously, talk about the butterfly effect. In his rush to leave, and probably feeling pretty disappointed, David Blair walked off that ship with the key to the binoculars still in his coat pocket. A tiny, completely understandable oversight that would change history forever.
So fast forward, the ship is at sea, and the lookouts, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, realize the binoculars are locked up tight. They can't get to them. So what were their orders? Just that. You'll have to use your eyes.
And this is just so crucial. They weren't just missing their best tool, they were sailing into the absolute worst-case scenario for spotting ice. It was a moonless, pitch-black night, and the sea was as flat as a pane of glass. That meant there were no waves breaking at the base of the icebergs, which would have created a white line of foam. They were effectively flying blind.
So you've got to ask yourself, right? How much of a difference could a pair of binoculars really have made against a literal mountain of ice? Well, as it turns out, all the difference in the world.
37. That is the number of seconds the crew had from the moment the lookout screamed, "Iceberg right ahead," to the moment of impact. Just over half a minute. Try to imagine turning a 46,000-ton ship in that amount of time.
You can just see the dominoes fall, one by one. A key is forgotten, the lookouts are left blind, the iceberg is spotted way, way too late, and the ship can't turn in time. It's just a tragic, direct line from a simple mistake to a massive disaster.
And listen, this isn't just speculation. Modern simulations and maritime experts all come to the same conclusion. With those binoculars, the iceberg would have been seen just 20 to 30 seconds earlier. It's an absolutely agonizingly small amount of time.
And those extra seconds, they would have been just enough. Just enough time for the ship's huge rudder to start to turn the bow clear. The Titanic would have sailed right past that iceberg, arrived in New York, and its story would be one of triumph, not tragedy.
So what happened to this little key?
the object that could have completely rewritten history. Well, it went on to have a pretty incredible story of its own.
David Blair, the officer who walked off with it, kept that key for the rest of his life. He passed it down to his daughter, and for almost 100 years, it was just this private family keepsake, a quiet, kind of haunting reminder of the voyage he was supposed to be on.
Then, in 2007, that little piece of brass went up for auction. It sold for £90,000. It became this tangible, incredibly valuable symbol of its unbelievable story.
And that's really the thought that this whole story leaves you with, isn't it? It makes you wonder, how many other huge moments in history have turned on something so small, so simple? A forgotten key, a missed phone call, a wrong turn. It just goes to show you how a tiny detail can change absolutely everything.